What's up? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking all about my birth story with my daughter Vivian. I've seen a lot of these videos done on people's channels and I think they're really cool, especially because I just feel like every birth is so different and every story is so unique. I just love hearing different people's experiences with birth. So I'm really excited to share my experience with you guys today. Going back to the beginning parts of my pregnancy, my daughter was frank breech from 20 weeks on. At that 20-week anatomy scan, we found out that she was in frank breech position and she had plenty of time to flip, but she didn't. We were going back at the end of my pregnancy weekly for non-stress tests because of an issue that they found with my daughter's kidney. So I was getting ultrasounds every week, and every week we were confirming the fact that she was still breech. Around 34 weeks is when my doctor kind of said if she was gonna flip, she would have already, so we probably should schedule a C-section. We decided to schedule a C-section for August 16th. That would have put me right at 39 weeks, and that was our plan, was to deliver on Friday, August 16th of 2019. I had asked my doctor if there was a chance that I could go into labor early, and she said obviously there's always a chance, but it's unlikely because my daughter is breech that I would dilate because it's a butt pushing on the cervix versus a head pushing on the cervix. So because of that, I was under the impression that it was unlikely that even if I went into labor early, it was very unlikely that I would dilate or anything of that nature because she's breech. So the week of her expected delivery, I had asked my husband at the beginning of the week, I said, at what point this week will you feel good, like you kind of have everything done and you're ready for baby to be here? And he said he had some stuff he needed to take care of Tuesday morning, but after Tuesday morning, he felt like he was gonna, at any point the baby could come and he would feel pretty ready for it. So Tuesday during the day, I spent the day with my mom and we hung out, and I didn't know it at the time, but all during the day I was actually having little contractions. After a while, I decided I would start timing them, only because they weren't painful, but they were just kind of kept happening. So I thought I would time them to see if there was any pattern or anything regular about them. For hours, they were all over the place. Like very mild pain every 15 minutes, every 20, every 7, every 5, every 3, every 15. It was just all over the place, and pain was very minimal. And I wasn't even fully convinced that they were real contractions. So that evening, my husband and I sit down to watch Bachelor in Paradise, and I told him that I was having these weird, what I thought might be contractions, and that I was timing them. And during the show, I got up to pee because, you know, at this late in the game of pregnancy, you're peeing every 20 minutes. So I got up and I went pee, and I saw what I thought was probably my mucus plug plop into the toilet. And so I sent a picture to my mom and I asked her, and she said it probably was. But the thing about your mucus plug is that can drop and you could still be days before you go into labor. So I didn't take a whole lot of stock in that. I just kind of was like, all right, well, that's happening, so that's cool. So after the show ended, my husband and I went upstairs and we got into bed, and I was like, I'm just gonna sleep this off. I think it's gonna go away. I'm just gonna sleep it off and we'll reassess in the morning. Well, I had to get up to pee again, of course. So I get up to go pee, and after I pee, I stood up and some more fluid came out. And at that point, I wasn't 100% sure if I was done peeing or if it was my water leaking. So I called my mom and she told me to take a mirror and see if I can tell where the fluid is coming from. It definitely did not look like pee, it looked like amniotic fluid. So I went ahead and called triage, and they told me to come in and be checked. And so my husband hops out of bed and is ready to go in 30 seconds and turns to me and says, and I quote, "Put a diaper on and let's go." And I'm over here it's no rush. I ate food at 8 o'clock. They're gonna wanna section me in the morning. I'm not gonna be dilated. This is no big deal. We can take our time, yada yada. I'm like throwing extra things in my hospital bag, just moseying around, kissing and hugging the dogs, telling them goodbye. We get in the car and I'm like, oh, we need gas. So we stop for gas on the way, and we finally get to the hospital and we're pulling around the drive to pull into the parking garage. And all of a sudden, a real painful contraction hits. And I'm like, ooh, like that took my breath away. That one hurt. And we pull into the parking garage and it's 11:47 p.m. Remember that time. And I stand up to get out of the car and just a pop and a gush of fluid all over the ground, all over me. And I turn to my husband and I say, I'm pretty sure that's my water. He wanted to run and grab me a wheelchair, and I was like, no, I can walk, it's fine, it's not that far. And as we're walking in, I start getting these contractions that are coming way more frequently, and they're far more painful. So at this point, I'm in a ton of pain, and my husband runs down the breezeway to go and get me a wheelchair. I sit in the wheelchair, he's wheeling me in, we get to the triage desk, and they're trying to like take down my information, and I am just in so much pain, I can barely say anything. At this point, my contractions went from being very irregular and no pain at all to extremely painful and every 2 to 3 minutes. So they take us into the triage room and they told me to go ahead and give a urine sample and get into the gown. And I am just, no modesty at this point, just ripping off my clothes because I was soaking wet and in a ton of pain. And I go to give a urine sample and just, it's a mixture of pee and amniotic fluid, and I don't even know, it's a mess. And I put it on the counter and I asked my husband to help me put the gown on, and as I'm trying to let him tie it, I'm like running away because I had this sudden urge like where I just had to sit down because I was in so much pain. And so he's like behind me trying to tie my gown, and I'm like just dying in pain. And the nurse comes in and I sit down in the bed and she gets me all hooked up, the monitor hooked up so that they can see how Viv is doing, and she's just in there chilling, like nothing's even affecting her at all, which is great, but also like, ow. The nurse takes one look at me and says, yes, you're in labor, yes, your water broke. I'm gonna let the midwife know so she can come in and check you, and then we're gonna have one of the doctors come in and do an ultrasound to make sure you're still breech. The midwife came in to check me to see how far dilated I was, and they said that depending on how dilated I was going to determine how quickly they moved, which I assume meant whether they were going to wait until morning to do the C-section or whether they were going to take me overnight to do the C-section. So the midwife comes in and she checks me and she turns and looks at the nurse and she goes, yeah, she's a 7, maybe an 8. And all of a sudden, the mood in the room just totally shifts. And everyone just goes into, not panic mode, but like, we need to get this baby out very quickly mode. And it was like a fine oiled machine, just everyone had their place and everyone had what like their specific job, and everyone just started working. And someone was getting an IV started, someone else was explaining everything to my husband, someone else was getting some information from me. I mean, they were just like boom, 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 checking everything off. It felt like it was forever, but it was only a couple minutes and they were ready to wheel me down to the OR. So they took my husband to the PACU, and I guess while they were in the PACU, they told him that if they were not able to adequately like get the spinal in, that they might have to sedate and intubate me to get the baby out, and if that was the case, he would not be able to come back for the delivery. So the nurse says to me, Brooke, we really need you to just sit still for these like 2 or 3 minutes so we can get this in, and then all of your pain is going to go away. So if you can just sit still for a little bit, we can take care of all of your pain. So I grit and bared it, and I got in position, and they were able to successfully place the spinal. and all of a sudden all my pain was gone. It was amazing. And so they laid me flat, they put my Foley in, and then they said they were gonna check me once more before they got started. And when they checked me, I was at a 10. So in the maybe 10 minutes it took to go from the triage room to the OR, I went from 8 to a 10. And at that point, they were slicing me open to get this baby out because they were running out of time before she started to try to come out butt first. So they brought my husband in the room and he came up to my head, and within maybe 2 minutes of him being in the room, they had baby out. And she was screaming and just so loud, and he was able to go over to the warmer with her and kind of get her settled and get her all wrapped up. And he brought her over to my head and I was able to kind of see her. I will say all of this was such an out-of-body whirlwind experience that in the moment I had a really hard time comprehending the fact that I just delivered a baby. And as much as I wanted to look at her, my neck hurt and I wanted to just look the other way because that was a more comfortable position for me, and they had me like strapped down on the table, like arms out, and it was just uncomfortable. So he had her there and I was just kind of out of it. Felt very confused, and it was just a little bit traumatizing, to be honest. Just everything, how quickly it all happened, and it was so unexpected, but we were so blessed and so lucky that I was healthy and didn't have any complications, and my daughter was very healthy and didn't have any complications. And so we felt very blessed that God was watching over us in that hospital room and in that OR, and thankfully everyone came out of it healthy and unscathed. So they went ahead and took us to the PACU where my mom was able to come back and visit, and I was able to do skin to skin and start breastfeeding. And we spent a couple hours there before we went to our room, and that was where we kind of stayed for the next couple of days for my recovery, and then we were discharged home. So my birth story is a bit of a whirlwind, crazy experience. And remember when I told you to remember that time, 11:47 p.m.? My daughter was born August 14th at 1:02 a.m., which means that just over 60 minutes was how long it took from the time we pulled our ticket from the parking structure to the time that that baby was out of me. And that is just like crazy to me. She came into this world so fast, and it all makes sense because she is such a fiery, crazy little girl, and she likes things done her way, on her time. I mean, her delivery makes total sense to me now, looking back on it. That is my birth story with my daughter. If you guys like this video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video.